Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we tear through the sources to give you the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed. Today, our mission is focused on just one sculpture, but it's one of the world's most replicated religious images. We're talking about the iconic Christus statue, but we're looking beyond just the, serene white marble you probably see maybe in temples, hospitals, visitor centers. It's everywhere. We are diving deep into the really extraordinary life of its creator, Bertel Thorvaldsen. He was this 19th century Danish sculptor, and his journey. Well, it's from the absolute bottom of society to becoming this international neoclassical titan. It's a fascinating, a true rags to riches epic.
It really is an incredible story of ascent. We're charting the evolution of an artist who, well, he was born into grinding poverty but rose to become a national hero in Denmark. And his great work, The Christus, didn't just showcase his neoclassical mastery. It fundamentally redefined how the Western world emotionally and physically depicts Jesus Christ. It shifted the focus away from sacrifice towards invitation.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think to truly appreciate his rise, we have to start right at the beginning. You have to picture the maybe grimy shipyards of Copenhagen in the late 18th century, because that's where his story really begins. Bertel Thorvaldsen was born probably around 1770, maybe give or take a couple of years. We can't actually be precise because his birth certificate was never found. And that small fact, well, it already tells you something about his humble beginnings, doesn't it? His father was a woodcarver, apparently constantly struggling with a serious drinking habit, which meant the family was truly destitute. So young Bertel's education was, well, unconventional, attending the Royal Danish Academy of Art by day and then helping his father carve decorative designs on ships late into the night.
Yeah, and what's astonishing is the sheer precocity of his talent, despite all those circumstances. He was accepted into the Royal Danish Academy of Art in 1781. He was just 11 years old, incredibly young. And this wasn't some casual hobby. For him, this was like his desperate path out of poverty. His success came fast, too. He first won the highly sought-after silver medal, and then, in 1793, he secured the really prized gold medal for his release, St. Peter Healing the Crippled Beggar.
And that gold medal, that meant everything, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That prize came with a crucial stipend, and that funded the next big stage of his life, the trip south to Rome, the artistic heart of the world.
It did. And, because his actual birth date was always uncertain, when he finally arrived in Rome, it was March 8th, 1797, he decided to consider that date, March 8th, to be his true Roman birthday. He actually celebrated it for the rest of his life. It's symbolized his artistic rebirth, a deliberate choice maybe to cast off the hardship of his youth and claim a new beginning.
That's such a poignant detail. It really marked the start of his professional identity. So what kind of training was he getting in Italy once he arrived?
It was intensive classical study. He found a really powerful mentor in Georg Zoega, a Danish archaeologist who is also a numismatist, meaning, an expert in coins and their history. So Zoega provided the sort of academic foundation.
Yeah.
But then he studied the actual craft under Asmus Jacob Karsten. Karsten was this committed, if apparently famously erratic, German master of neoclassicism. And that immersion, it really cemented Thorvaldsen's commitment to classical purity and restraint in his art.
And that deep training, it led almost immediately to success, right?
Yeah.
In 1801, he completed the model for his huge Jason statue. And it caught the attention of Antonio Canova, who was, well, arguably the biggest celebrity sculptor in Europe at the time. Getting high praise from Canova must have been an incredible boost for him.
Absolutely. A huge boost. Yeah. But here's where the drama really kicks in. And this is why his life often reads like fiction. Despite that critical acclaim from Canova, high praise doesn't pay the rent in Rome. His stipend had run dry. He couldn't sustain himself financially, and had actually packed his bags. He was ready to abandon his Roman dream and sail back to Denmark.
Wow. He was literally on the brink of leaving the city that he had just decided was his birthday.
Exactly. But then, in 1803, really at the very last moment, this wealthy English art collector named Thomas Hope intervened. Hope commissioned him to execute the Jason statue in marble. This commission was a lifeline, a total lifeline. It provided the funds he desperately needed and, maybe more importantly, the international patronage that guaranteed his career would finally take off. I mean, if Hope hadn't walked into his studio that day, the history of neoclassical sculpture might look very different.
That commission saved him, definitely. But speaking of Jason, you said the marble version took, a staggering 25 years to finish? That time frame raises an interesting question about his work habits. If he was so influential, why the massive delay? And how did he manage the sheer volume of his output later on?
Well, that 25-year delay is actually a fantastic window into his growing celebrity. He just became so busy, commissions pouring in from popes, from emperors, from royalty across Europe, that he had to change his entire working method. By the time he was a recognized master, he essentially became more of a designer and finisher. He hired skilled assistants, you see, to handle the initial, really tedious process of rough cutting away most of the marble block, while he focused solely on the crucial stages, sketching the vision, refining the models, and then applying those exquisite finishing touches himself.
So he shifted from being a hands-on carver, like his poor father maybe, to being more like an atelier director, running a workshop essentially. Did he ever carve anything fully himself after he got famous?
Very rarely, it seems. The sources note that his Adonis, which was completed in 1832, is one of the few large pieces carved almost entirely by his own hand. And because of that focused personal effort, many art historians believe Adonis is the work closest to antique Greek ideals. It perhaps represents his purest artistic intent.
His fame was truly international then. He wasn't just working in Rome anymore. He was becoming a kind of European institution.
He absolutely was. His statues and monumental works, you can find them all across the continent today. I mean, think about the scale of this. He was granted the immense honor, especially for a non-Catholic artist like him, of sculpting the tomb of Pope Pius VII, right there in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. That just speaks volumes about his universally respected talent, right? You also see his signature style in the famous Lion Monument in Lucerne, Switzerland, and then monuments dedicated to intellectual giants like Gutenberg in Mainz, Germany, and Copernicus in Warsaw, Poland.
So after 4 decades immersed in the classical era of Italy, the prodigal son finally returned home. In 1838, he sailed back to Denmark and was received as a national hero. Just incredible. He had become the first internationally acclaimed Danish artist ever, and Copenhagen granted him the freedom of the city. I can only imagine the triumph of that homecoming, especially after starting from basically nothing.
Okay, this brings us to the piece he is most famous for today, certainly the most replicated, the Christus statue. The work was commissioned for the newly rebuilt Church of Our Lady the Vorfru Kirk in Copenhagen. Tell us a bit about the circumstances of that commission.
Certainly, the church itself had been damaged repeatedly over the centuries, most recently by fire and the British bombardment of 1807. So it was being rebuilt in this powerful neoclassical style, which was, of course, a perfect fit for Thorvaldsen's aesthetic. The statue itself, the Christus, was completed in 1821, and then the surrounding 12 apostles were finished quite a bit later, in 1838.
And the original statue itself, what's it like? Oh, it's a truly commanding presence. It stands 3.45 meters tall. That's over 11 feet, and it's carved from pristine Carrara marble. Beautiful stuff. It resides today in the Evangelical Lutheran Cathedral, the Church of Our Lady. And the inscription on the base is short, simple, and profoundly inviting, Kommer til mig. That's Danish for come to me, citing the passage from Matthew 11.28. And he was so personally devoted to this commission that he even carved and donated the baptismal font that stands before the altar. That was his personal gift to the church.
Now here's where we get to the real aha moment, the thing that sets the statue apart and gives it its enduring power. Most traditional statues of Christ commissioned around that time, they showed his hands stretched out wide, didn't they? In a position reminiscent of the crucifixion, that sacrificial pose.
Yes, that posture was definitely standard. But Thorvaldsen consciously made a different choice, a really significant choice. His Christus has Christ's hands open, yes, but critically, they are directed down and slightly forward. It's still an open embrace, absolutely, but the downward motion suggests both humility and readiness, acceptance. It completely removes the focus from the moment of death and suffering and focuses entirely on the moment of welcome and perpetual invitation.
It makes the figure feel so accessible, doesn't it? As if Christ is constantly present, ready to scoop us up into his arms, as one source suggested. It transforms the sculpture into this perpetual invitation.
That's precisely the power of the design. However, interestingly, despite its powerful local meaning in Copenhagen, the Christus was actually not well known globally for decades. For a long time, it wasn't until 1896, that's almost 75 years after it was completed, that an American textbook writer saw a reproduction somewhere and dubbed it the perfect statue of Christ in the world. And that single quote, apparently in that American school book, is what launched its international reputation.
Wow. It's amazing how a piece of text, just one description, can transform a localized masterpiece into a global icon like that. That international recognition, paired with his huge national fame, led to a fantastic architectural legacy back home in Denmark, too.
It did. The Thorvaldsen Museum was completed in 1848, specifically built to house his life's work, his entire collection. It was the very first public museum ever built in Denmark, designed by his friend, the architect Michael Gottlieb Beinsbøll. And Beinsbøll took inspiration from the colorful, excavated architectural sites of ancient Rome, places like Pompeii and Herculaneum. You can see it in the design. Thorvaldsen donated his entire fortune and all his art, his own works, and his collection to it, which is why he's buried there today, right in the courtyard, surrounded by his creations.
And the building itself, the museum, it serves as a kind of memorial, too, specifically telling the story of his dramatic return home.
Exactly. You have to look at the exterior walls. They're covered in this magnificent sun frieze. It's a series of painted relief murals that visually tells the whole story of his heroic return in 1838. It's quite dramatic. It depicts his ship, the Rhoda, arriving in Copenhagen harbor. You see the heavy crates of marble statues being transported ashore, and key figures are shown greeting him on the docks, including his famous friend, the author Hans Christian Andersen. It's narrative art celebrating a national myth, really.
And because that unique, universally welcoming posture of the Christus resonated so deeply with people, it became one of his most replicated works, didn't it? It started appearing in the most unexpected places, symbolizing comfort and hope far beyond its original Lutheran context in Copenhagen.
Oh, absolutely. We find copies everywhere now. There's a full-size replica at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, where it's actually known as the Christus Consolator, the comforting Christ, a fitting name. You see them in cemeteries in Berlin, in various churches all over Europe, and very prominently at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in California. Its message just translates across cultures and purposes.
And I think one of the most significant adoptions of the replica is by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. When did that affiliation begin?
That started back in the 1950s when the church acquired a 3.5-meter replica, same size as the original. They then used a second replica very strategically at the 1964 New York World's Fair, which is, a critical moment for them. They used that globally recognized sort of non-sectarian Christian image to clearly identify the church as Christian to a huge international audience. That specific replica now stands in Temple Square in Salt Lake City, and copies are in their visitor centers worldwide.
And its significance for them was further cemented very recently, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. In April 2020, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints introduced a new official symbol, like a logo, and the core image featured is Thorvaldsen's Christus. The church president, Russell M. Nelson, explained that including the Christus image ensures that everything the church does is centered on Jesus Christ. It's really a huge testament to the statue's enduring and universal spiritual appeal, even today.
Just when you think you've measured the full scope of his legacy, you find a new, modern interpretation. It keeps going. The final and maybe most surprising detail from our sources is the 6-foot replica constructed entirely out of 30,000 white Lego pieces.
Lego pieces.
Yeah, by parishioners in a Swedish church back in 2009.
That truly proves the point, doesn't it? I mean, from Carrara marble to plastic building blocks, the core message of Thorvaldsen's artistry, that gesture of welcome, it just lives on. It keeps adapting and inspiring new forms and interpretations nearly 2 centuries later. It's quite remarkable.
So what does this all mean for us looking back? Thorvaldsen's life journey, from a poor woodcarver's son whose birth date wasn't even certain to the most acclaimed neoclassical artist in Europe, it's the embodiment of ambition, really. But maybe his greatest monumental contribution is that uniquely inviting posture of the Christus, which continues to welcome millions worldwide in so many different contexts.
And perhaps, if we connect this back to the bigger picture of his life, it raises an important question, a final thought maybe. Why did he ultimately return home? Despite his massive international fame, those endless commissions from popes and emperors, the allure of the cosmopolitan art world of Rome, Thorvaldsen returned to Denmark, and he specifically arranged to be buried right in the center of his museum, surrounded by his work. This final decision, especially when you couple it with his noted refusal to ever marry, it suggests perhaps a profound devotion to his craft, to his art, that ultimately transcended all worldly or personal ties. His art was everything.
A fascinating closing thought on a life dedicated so entirely to creation. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of great artists and their enduring legacies, we really encourage you to check out Anita Louise Art for more great content. You can sign up for their free newsletter to stay in the loop and also subscribe to their YouTube channel. Both are just filled with fascinating videos and information.